to tonight's important and timely webinar, which is entitled The Working Class, War on the Working Class, Education Workers Respond. You cannot watch the news without hearing about the COVID epidemic and what its impact is on the reopening of schools. And of course, many of us know that Trump and Betsy DeVos, the education secretary, are demanding that schools reopen with in-person learning, as usual, as if there is not a pandemic. But as the video clip shows from The Intercept, it just demonstrated that the reopening would jeopardize not only the lives of teachers and students and education workers, but entire communities, and particularly the Black, Latinx, and other communities of color who have been particularly vulnerable during this time of the coronavirus. Tonight, you will hear from the real experts in this health crisis, the frontline education workers who have been working with their parent communities to develop a plan that will guarantee safety, equity, and justice as we enter the new school year. Tonight, we salute the education workers who are fighting this uphill battle under capitalism, and which is doing its best to use this pandemic to privatize and destroy the public school system in this country. I am a recently retired teacher from Oakland, California. I'm a retired member of the Oakland Education Association and a current member of the California Teachers Association. I use pronouns they, them, and she and her. I have been working with other teachers in the Oakland Education Association since schools shut down in March to get all the students full access to Chromebooks and internet. There is still a wide gulf, and at least 30% of the students have no access to Wi-Fi and/or consistent access to the internet. Before we begin our program, and before I introduce my co-moderator, Nate Chase, I would like to highlight some of the recent organizing that education workers have been doing. On August 3rd, a broad coalition of organizations under the banner Equity or Else came together demanding safe schools, healthy schools, equitable schools. Let's see. In some cities, the protests focused on the issue of removing the school police and abolishing school police departments. Education workers, students, and parents all around the country participated in virtual and in-person rallies and protests to let schools, administrators, politicians, and the federal government know that we value the lives and the futures of our students and teachers. Workers World participated in one such action in New York City that we'll hear about later, organized by the United Federation of Teachers. Now I would like to introduce Nate Chase. Nate is my co-moderator. He is a member of the New York City branch of Workers World Party, where he organizes around police brutality, migrant rights, anti-imperialism, and related struggles. Take it away, Nate.
Thank you, Judy, for the introduction. It's great to be on with everybody this evening. So education workers all around the country are in motion right now, pushing back against profit-driven plans to reopen the schools for in-person learning too early and when it's not safe. A militant struggle is unfolding in Boston, and it's being led by the Boston school bus drivers. So we're very fortunate to have with us today Andre Francois and Steve Gillis, the president and financial secretary, respectively, of the Boston School Bus Drivers, United Steelworkers Local 8751. Andre and Steve, what is happening now in Boston with education workers and the school reopening? And what role is your union playing in the struggle?
What's happening now is that they want to open schools, reopen schools when they're not safe. They don't have any plan to disinfect the buses, the bus yard. They don't have any work done to make everybody safe to school. So I prepared a statement before and then I can talk about that a little bit. You want me to go ahead?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. Like you said, my name is Andre Francois. I am the president of the School Bus Drivers Union. I'm delighted to be one of the panelists here tonight. We the school bus drivers say no school reopening without union plan and design health and safety procedure. Teachers, nurses, bus drivers and monitors, custodian and paraprofessionals, food workers, demand a seat at the planning table now. Our demands are simple. First, we want nurses on every school facilities, including bus yards and cafeterias, any place for nutritional food and facilities to ensure frontline emergency COVID-19 standard operating procedures. Second, we have a private company that we work for. They need to stop the fraud because we caught them doing some fraudulent stuff. They need to hire professional bus drivers and facility disinfecting companies, because the companies that they have doing things for them, they are like auto body workers, and they're not professional cleaning and disinfecting companies. We said that they have to hire them now in order to have reopening of schools. They have to hire more bus drivers and bus monitors, impact bargain for full hazard pay and benefits for all school workers now. For weeks in February and early March 2020, USW Local 8751 published demands to our private employer, Veolia Transdev in Boston Public Schools, to professionally disinfect our bus yards and the buses, to institute emergency health and safety protocol, such as providing masks and other PPEs, temperature screening, strict outdoor physical distancing, touchless restroom facilities, etc. As the pandemic spread worldwide, our employer and responsible parties failed to act, and in April, Local 8751 suffered the death of 4 drivers to COVID-19. We were active in the city school home delivery program, food delivery program to thousands of Boston BPS children. Only the union forceful on-site intervention and job action to enforce emergency COVID-19 website standard operating procedures stop infection among our members until Transdev dumped us all in unemployment line in late June. Local 751 pledges to our members and the children, family, and communities we serve, not one more death. Local 8751 applaud the Boston Teachers Union as a frontline and applaud you also for bringing awareness that no school should be reopened. Essential in our opinion, no negotiable demand for union nurses in every school. As the school bus is first daily contact with tens of thousands of Boston, most precious cargo. Local 8751 also demand BTU nurses to be stationed at the bus yard to assist Local 8751 with ensuring and enforcing emergency COVID-19 procedures. Lastly, we had to remind the school bus the Boston Teachers Union nurses, that unlike us, we are a private company, we don't have that problems. They have the power from the American Federation of Teachers that to have a health strike based on health and safety. So if there's no a safety strike, actually. So we said nurses and health professionals for the children, and safety and justice for the bus drivers. Thank you. That was our statement.
Thank you, Andre. Thank you for sharing that with us. It's really inspiring to see that struggle going on in Boston, and to see that connection between all the different education workers involved in it. Steve, would you like to hop on and add a few ideas, a few thoughts?
Thank you, Nick. I've been driving a school bus for going on 36 years now in Boston. And, you know, we've been on strike 11 times in our history. But this opening of schools is obviously the most critical, and as people pointed out earlier, life or death. And so this statement that Andre just read, he delivered that at a demonstration in front of City Hall, Boston City Hall, last Wednesday, with nurses who had come with their folding chairs, channeling Shirley Chisholm, the first Black woman to run for president in 1972, who once said, if they don't give us a seat at the table, we'll bring our own folding chairs. And we occupied City Hall Plaza with them for quite a long time. And we laid out the facts as we see them on the ground, on the front line, with the nurses, with the teachers, that no way in hell was Boston Public Schools, or any of its many privatized charter operations, which are even in worse condition, ready to reopen safely. And we said, no, we will not do it. They had a September 10th start date plan. And in the middle of surging pandemic statistics, where in the early spring, as Andre said, when we were running a food distribution program, we had to take over our own health and safety security operations at this food distribution program, because the pandemic had Massachusetts at some of its highest levels in the country. We were leading the country in infection rates at the time. And we had people dying who were active on the job. And we decided that we were going to enforce when the company and the city did not, you know, wearing of masks and washing of hands. And even at the gate, we set up our own security and refused to let managers inside who weren't wearing masks in very bad leadership form. And we had to force them to set up the logistics of the bus yard with tents outside and social distancing, to entirely replace the bathrooms inside for a touchless experience. Anyway, every day was a huge struggle where every day we had to say, no, you won't go any further unless you make this improvement. And we stopped infections. But in this second round, you know, when the nurses and teachers got together, the mayor had to call a press conference 2 days later and say, we've decided we're not going back September 10th. In fact, the state had to make an agreement with the teachers, and it's a partial victory, that for a period of time, 10 days or more, no students will be coming back, and they have an opportunity to prepare classrooms, to prepare relationships with families and students. And the bus drivers as well need preparation time. And unless they operate under our that is the union's standard operating procedures, that include health professionals at the bus yards, that include constant vigilance and discipline around distancing and masks, that include, looking at the science and the medicine. We see this, as Judy pointed out at the beginning, as Trump and Wall Street trying to force us back to work in the same way, in April and March, they were, listening to the Purdue's and the Tysons and forcing meat packers back into the meat packing plants where people continue to die and become infected by the thousands. In Georgia, we're seeing and watching very carefully where schools have reopened. And just in this past week, with school bus transportation, already the infection rate is up and classrooms and schools and operations are being needed to be shut down. If we win this struggle, and I'm certain that we can, to demand that the schools are not reopened until they're safe, the flip side of it, we lose pay. And so we're demanding full pay and benefits as well. And it's the next struggle that we're going into. School bus drivers in Boston will have no health insurance come August 31st. We will have no pay if they open up schools, and transportation is not part of it in a remote only plan, for instance. I'm sure that millions of workers around the country in the schools face the same situation. Remote only leaves the rest of us starving and unable to return to work at any time when we lose our houses and our families and our ability to survive. So these are major struggles. And, I'll end by saying this. Local 8751 has raised a resolution and passed it unanimously in our executive board and our membership, as we have been active from day one in the Black Lives Matter movement after the lynching of George Floyd. We take to heart the demands to defund and abolish the police, and we have called for that in a resolution, and we are bringing that to the Greater Boston Labor Council and to the Mass AFL-CIO to do what we can to say the police and the school police and ICE agents should not even be a part of our labor movement, and we can use the millions of dollars. They paid the Boston police in headlines today, $8.5 million in overtime to police us in demonstrations the last 6 weeks. This money needs to be put into making schools safe, and we're not going to go back until they are. So thank you so much for letting us speak today on your program. Take care.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Steve, and thank you so much, Andre, for telling us about the struggles that you're involved in. School bus drivers, as a public school teacher, and I want to step back just for a second, and I guess I forgot to say my name. My name is Judy Greenspan, and I, as a retired teacher, I totally respect and understand many of the struggles that the bus drivers and other education workers are going through right now. Our next speaker is Lorraine Liriano. She's an educator in New York City. She's a member of the Moore Caucus of the United Federation of Teachers and Call to Action on Puerto Rico. Steve, you need to please stop your video. That would be great. As you know, New York City until a few weeks ago was the epicenter of the coronavirus pandemic. Lorraine, this is a question for you. How are teachers organizing to push back against the planned reopening of New York City schools?
First of all, thank you for this opportunity to be on this panel with workers from around the country that are really expressing what are many of the issues that are happening, not only in this country, but in Puerto Rico as well. I want to say that Moore was the one that organized the demonstration on August 3rd. That's the movement of rank and file educators caucus. It wasn't the United Federation of Teachers under Michael Mulgrew, but this particular caucus. And this caucus has been very active in the Black Lives Matter movement and has been consistently meeting since March and before around the issues that are happening in New York City public schools. One of the things that had come out of the protests that happened on August 3rd, or some of the things that was highlighted, was that schools are unsafe in New York at this time to return, and that teachers, parents, community activists, legal aid services are asking that schools go completely remote. And these are some of the reasons why. We know that despite the fact that the mayor and the chancellor of New York City schools are presenting a plan, this plan does not have the financial backing nor the services that are needed. For instance, the mayor said that there is going to be, at schools, is going to be disinfection, there's going to be available PPE, there's going to be custodial personnel that will be available. When the custodian union was asked about this statement, they said no, there hasn't been any disinfection in the schools. The HVAC system has not been cleaned. We know for a fact that a lot of the disinfectants are on backlog to be purchased. So that's a major issue that the mayor and the chancellor are presenting, and that clearly is not true. The other issue is that this past week, despite the situation with the pandemic, teachers at New York City public schools are being accessed. And let me explain what that means. When a teacher is accessed from a school, it means they no longer are part of the school community, and they are at the behest of the central school district, which means that they will be moving from one place to another. This really destabilizes the school system. And it's very ironic that teachers are being accessed, okay, when billionaires in New York City, okay, from March until May, okay, billionaires have increased. 118 New York City billionaires increased their net worth to $44.9 billion between March and May 15th. And 2/3 of the billionaires increased their wealth for $567 billion. We have to look at these contradictions in the system, because at one hand, we're being told that we are being supported as parents and families so that we could return to schools, but in actuality, the narrative is not true at all. And we have to make sure that we are vigilant and that we are reading what is actually happening in schools and talking to the front lines and speaking to each other so that we know what is actually transpiring. Again, the mayor also has been dangling in many press conferences that there is going to be 22,000 layoffs of city workers if the federal funding from the HEROES Act is not passed. Now, what we say in More Caucus is, why isn't there a millionaire's tax? What happened to the campaign of fiscal equality? That is a campaign that was done many, many years ago. The city of New York is owed millions of dollars because of that lawsuit. Where is that funding? And we want a commitment from the city of New York. We know that millions of dollars have been slashed from the school budget. And we are demanding that lawmakers, now that it's an election year, we are going to be organizing with parents and with the communities to inform them what legislatures are involved with the slashing of those funds. We are having a meeting on Saturday, this Saturday, which I will be sharing with Workers World, the links, so that people can openly get involved in educating themselves on these issues and making demands to their legislators, and also to demand at the federal level that the HEROES Act be passed. We also understand that families have gone through a great deal of trauma concerning these issues, and that there has to be the support services in the school, the mental health services and the support services. And there must continue to be a moratorium on evictions, on foreclosures, and on rent, and that there should be a continued supplements of rent so that people can continue to be in their homes, and an increase of food stamps and other direct food assistance. We know that students will not be able to return back to school and be able to be in a school environment if they are worried that they are going to be evicted, if they are worried that they are not going to have enough food to eat. At the beginning of the pandemic, part of our time in our schools was dealing with those particular issues. So it's very important that we address that. I just want to quickly say about Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is facing some of those same issues. However, the hurricane that recently happened, so many people are without any electricity. The Puerto Rican teachers have returned already to the schools remotely for training, but they are pushing back against the governor of Puerto Rico so that the schools can be delayed and can also be remote. But the remote learning has to be supported with free internet. More than 44% of families in Puerto Rico are below the poverty level. And so internet must be free. There must be technology available to all families. There also has to be contact tracing in schools and a school nurse. These are part of the demands. There is also, because of the earthquakes that happened in the summer, there's a lot of buildings that need to be inspected because of structural damages before students and teachers and school community go back into the schools. So their demands are consistent with the demands that are being made in New York. But in addition to that, they are facing the precarity of what the earthquake situation was, the damage of the schools. There needs to be money allocated to this. They also need the support for the federal funding. And they also need to have the support against what is the privatization of the electrical service in Puerto Rico that is trying to co-opt $18 billion of FEMA funding and $138 million by a company called Luma that was created bogusly between two other companies that merged. And this will be devastating for families if their electric bills are skyrocketed and they will not be able to have internet service so their children could go remote. Also in Puerto Rico, the level of COVID cases continues to rise and escalate because of so much tourism that has come into the island. So there has to be some measures by the government to stem the amount of tourism that is coming into an island and is affecting people being, getting the virus. In essence, I want to ask people to please go to the More page and to get information. You can also come to our page, a call to action on Puerto Rico. There are two petitions on change.org that you can be part of that really speak to the issues that teachers and communities are asking for: safe schools and equitable access, and defund the police, and to make sure that the services that are offered and the schools are safe for everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lorraine. It's great to hear. It's really important to hear so much about what's going on, not only in New York City, but also in Puerto Rico, a colony of the US that is far too often forgotten about in conversations among the left here. Before I introduce our next speakers, I wanted to just mention the workers.org webpage. This is the main webpage of Workers' World Party. It's where we publish our newspaper. Right now, we've suspended publishing a print edition because of COVID-19, but Everything we write, over 1,000 articles a year, is right up here on workers.org. And you can find a lot of articles there, like, for example, the one right there on the front page about the Boston Educator Fight Back. You can also find more information about Workers' World. And if you'd like to hear, if you like what you heard tonight and you're interested in joining the party, go to workers.org/join, and there's a quick form there to get in touch with us if you're interested in joining the party. So next, I'd like to highlight the struggle in another part of the country, the South. Hurricane Katrina, which devastated New Orleans and the surrounding area, was used as an excuse to privatize and severely weaken the public school system. Here today with us are two teachers from Jefferson Parish, Louisiana, Big E and John Guzda, both members of the American Federation of Teachers in the amazing, incredible New Orleans Workers Group. We understand that COVID levels are the highest in the country in Jefferson Parish, Louisiana. Could you tell us a little bit more about the situation there and what struggles you've had regarding the safe reopening of Jefferson Parish schools?
Hey, everybody. As Nate just mentioned, at least as of yesterday, the state of Louisiana is #1 in the entire country in per capita infection rate. Within the state, which is the highest again in the entire country, Jefferson Parish, which is located in the greater New Orleans area, has the highest number of infections within the state. Despite these obvious truths, teachers and education workers were put back into schools 3 days ago. The week before, several of us came together and we organized a rally against going back. The rally was successful. We've put pressure on the union, on our union. However, unfortunately, right now, what a lot of us are doing is we're fighting to make our union fight. Some of us within the Jefferson Federation of Teachers strike. Our union, which represents the largest school district in the state of Louisiana, still has not come around to that. We haven't given up all hope, but the reality is this. We've been back to work for just 3 days. And yesterday morning, already, there was news that a handful of teachers in our district and education workers had already contracted COVID-19. We don't know what a handful means. Our district is not sharing this information with us. When we hear a handful, we're thinking to ourselves, is it 5 people? Is it 15 people? Is it 20 people? The fact that we are a large district, we not telling us which schools are the sites of the infections. We organized a rally again last night at our district office. We had between 300 and 400 people attend a protest. There was a school board meeting that was called to potentially push back the delay of schools. 2 board members motioned for our district to push back our reopening start. However, this was quickly squashed when the other board members, who are in the pockets of the business community here in the greater New Orleans area, voted to adjourn the meeting when they declared that the meeting quote unquote, got out of control. The reason why they determined that the meeting got out of control was that there was a line of people, including education workers, parents, students, and community members, who entered into the boardroom to speak out against the reopening of schools. The Jefferson Parish Public School Board did not like what they were hearing, and as a result, they adjourned the meeting. So here we are as education workers. At this moment, we are in our schools. People are already getting sick. As of next Wednesday, students will be returning to schools. The last thing I'll say before I pass it to my colleague, Big E, is that we are going to continue to fight. We haven't given up. If I were to give any advice to any schools, any school districts, all education workers around the country, it would simply be this: start organizing now. Start organizing now if you haven't already done so. Thank you for your time. Passing it to Big E.
All right, thank you, that goes. Thank you, everybody out there. Much love to people and workers of the world. Just to touch on what Guz was speaking about, in our situation here in JP and, in the New Orleans area, it's a matter of what we're looking at is we know that, the capitalist class has an agenda, and that's to put the workers back to work, so they need glorified babysitters. That's the way they view us as teachers, so the thing is to push the kids back to school so that you could then get the parents back to work and you keep this capitalist machine rolling. That's the objective. And it's on us to, put as much of a fight and resistance to it as we can. And so just to point out that a few more of the issues, some of the undocumented, our population there, we have it's majority Black. We have about 56% or so Black, about 40 or so Latinx, and the rest white and Asian, but everybody poor. That's the uniting factor. It's all poor kids, poor teachers, right? Title I school, and it's a matter whether they have been trying to make some precaution. They're doing this hybrid thing. They're not teaching people how to teach digitally, and you're gonna have kids in class and you expected to do both. Nobody has taught you the process of that. They don't have the software together because they had a contract with whatever company. Now they got a contract with Google. We all got Google email. So now as Google sees the hustle of Zoom, they jumping on into this streaming thing. But yet it's not ready, but we are still expected to learn it as they learn it. And then the kids coming next week. And it's still talking about state standards and testing issues and all this kind of stuff. And we're like, man, are we gonna be alive? We're talking about our life field right now. The undocumented students, they don't have access to the free internet or the low-cost internet or the free laptops, that some of the schools been offering. They also don't have the ability to go get tested because of the fact of the matter that they may get deported and whatnot. Just last week, this parish had closed 2 bars, because people weren't adhering to the face mask and the 6 feet rule and whatnot. And they closed down 2 of those bars. So now they're expecting children, they're expecting to have elementary kids in school 5 days out the week. Middle and high, 4 days or something, it's different every level. But they are holding those children to a higher standard than they are people that sell alcohol. So like Guz was saying, we had the protest yesterday. We plan to have some more actions. The workers group actually has an action this Saturday where we are uniting unemployed and employed workers. We're gonna be at Duncan Plaza. That's one of our little home spots, where we set up shop and we go meet the people. It's a major bus stop hub in New Orleans. And something I want to say about New Orleans, like people think it's just a fun party game, liberal city, yeah, you come get drunk and have a good time and all that and that, but it's racist as fuck, it's capitalist, it's a racist, the divided city, and always has been. Don't let what they say on TV confuse you, I'm sure we all know this already, but like it's even if you have black faces and whatnot in these different places, they're controlled by the, you know, they're puppets, you know, they're controlled by the rich ruling class here, you know, whether it's all barons that they got down here, whether the real estate tycoons, you know what I mean? And me and Guzda out here, you know what I'm saying, and we on Front Street, it's a matter of a lot of people feel the way we do, but due to the economic impact and the fear of, you know what I'm saying, losing your job and not having your health benefits, you know what I'm saying? I had a brother of mine tell me about how his wife, you know, he almost lost his wife, you know, she had a heart attack and he had just recently lost his job, but he was able to, you know, find some emergency insurance or something of that nature to put on. Otherwise, he coming out of pocket and don't have that. People don't realize like just how like frightening that is for somebody. So it's a matter of we are constantly trying to tell people about the power that they have. And that's the work that we do within Take Them Down Nolan, New Orleans Workers Group and People's Assembly and the Hospitality Workers Alliance. I'm gonna put all that within the chat box so people can follow us and check us out on YouTube and Instagram and Facebook and everything. But we are ultimately trying to unite the working class here. We are doing stuff like going door to door. And you know what I'm saying, always taking the precautions of it and whatnot. We have a newspaper, the Workers Group, Workers Voice newspaper. I feel pressed for time, you know, I got a lot more to say, but ultimately, what it is that we want to accomplish for those kids there at their school is to provide, you know, all the schools should be closed. They didn't tell us about the ventilation or anything. They said we got to break up a fight, you got to get in there. We expecting to have like 20 kids in a class. You know, it's just ridiculous. And ultimately, we want those schools to be closed. We want to be able to have the digital divide needs to end. Need to be free internet as well as you know, free laptops and everything given for the students who can't afford it. It's a Title I school. It's actually, they are creating the separate but equal all over again. As kids with, you know, that with it, they're not going to miss the education, but those without it, they are clearly going to miss it. Otherwise, they're being put into a petri dish. And as well as teachers, staff, custodians, you know, cafeteria workers, bus drivers, everybody's beyond just teachers. So, you know, we're going to keep the struggle alive. We're going to keep fighting. You know, this thing ain't going away. Much love. And another thing, man, they talk about I don't have money for they had 4 undercover police out there and they had 2 drones. They following me and John around, you know, so I mean, like it's a real impactful and intense situation, but we ain't gonna back down, man. All power to the people.
Thank you so much, Big E and John. And the struggle in New Orleans and in Jefferson Parish sounds incredibly intense at this time. And everyone should go into the chat and get some of those addresses so that we can sign petitions and show support and do what we can. And I really wish you the best. Your scenario as a teacher, your scenario is what all of the teachers have been fearing and have been fighting so hard for virtual learning, which has its own problems, as we know, because of the lack of access for our poorest communities, which your community, when you were describing it, sounds just like Oakland and sounds just like what, you know, what we're dealing with in terms of lack of access and fighting to save the lives of our students. So I know that all of you probably have some questions that you might want to ask for the panelists, and I want to ask you to go into the Q&A, which is at the bottom of the Zoom webinar page, and please put them in, and we will try to answer as many as we can, time permitting. If you're on Facebook, I think you can put in a comment or put in a question on Facebook, and hopefully some of those can be answered too. Our next 2 speakers are educators from Salt Lake City, Utah. They are Summer Smith, who is an educator and member of the Utah Education Association, and Alyssa Faith, who is a preschool teacher and socialist. They're both socialists, but anyway, and they will share a time period. But there's one issue. I mean, of course, we want them to talk about the issues that they came here to talk about in terms of COVID and education and what's going on with the district and the government. But there's one issue that Big E touched on that I was hoping that maybe Alyssa could talk about, because she is a preschool teacher. And that's the health and safety of preschoolers and lower elementary school children. In some districts, the pressure is on because of many, many different reasons. And some of what, Steve and Andre were talking about, that we have parents who need to go to work, right? And there's no school, there's no work because the kids are home. So there's a push to send the preschoolers and the lower elementary school children to school. And so I know that's a great concern of teachers in terms of how do you manage social distancing for preschoolers. So could you include this in your discussion of what educators are doing in Salt Lake City to fight for the health and safety of education workers, children and their parents? And Summer and Alyssa, please take it away.
Okay, all right, well, thank you so much. Hi, everybody. My name is Alyssa. So just to kind of answer the question as far as trying to manage preschoolers with social distancing, it's been very, very difficult. We were switched to virtual learning with less than 1 day's notice. Many of us had never taught virtually before. We were given multiple new software programs to utilize with no training as far as them. We had to spend our own time researching and learning how to use them. This was done without bonuses, raise stipends, or anything like that. And now we have roughly double the confirmed cases in our city right now than we had when we first closed, but we're looking at going back in and starting teaching again. The last actually that I've heard, the plans are changing multiple times a day. The last I've heard is that we're going to be in charge of teaching a classroom simultaneously, while simultaneously virtually teaching other students, and implementing a new Corona-specific cleaning schedule that's much more intensive than than like what anything we had been required to do before. Any requests we make about how this is all supposed to be implemented have just been met with contradictory responses. So we're very scared, very worried. I have coworkers who are pregnant and coworkers who care for and with relatives, but mostly I'm just really worried too about my kids. They're very, very, very young. I'd have some really serious concerns about going back and their safety, even if I had full confidence in them being able to sort of manage what's going to be required of them. But that's not even the case. They're not going to understand and remember social distancing or having to keep a mask on. I don't know that all my students are going to have access to masks. I mean, we were told we would have access to masks. We've been winding up having to supply our own. We weren't able to get gloves because they said that the places where they get them from, like, it's been ordered up by like people in restaurants doing food prep. So we have like dish gloves that we've been trying to, re-clean and use in between uses. Where a lot of our materials we've had to get rid of that we would use to teach young children, because they say basically anything that can't kind of be scrubbed down with bleach just has to go. And then the items that we do have, we're asked to clean them between each and every child, but yet somehow any cleaning supplies we have, if you have them in a room with preschoolers, those are all supposed to be kept under lock and key and not brought out around the kids at all. So any questions we have about, well, how are we supposed to do this? It's sort of just met with contradictory responses. And there's been no talk of anything like hazard pay, bonuses, raises, or even simply just letting us work more paid hours just in order to get the jobs done. I'm really nervous about my kids. I'm really concerned for my families. I've had 2 students already test positive while they were in quarantine at home, and it still happened. One of them was told by the doctor that they had to quarantine away from their parent because of the situation. And if they'd been coming into my classroom, then that would have been half my kids potentially all in that situation, as opposed to just the one. I worry about them. I just want the best for my kids and for all my coworkers as well. I guess that's all I had right now. I'll give the time over to Summer.
Hi, I'm Summer. I have been a teacher for 8 years. I'm a special ed teacher working with special needs students where I do push in and pull out small groups. Right now, I live in a state that's a right to work state. And we're last in spending in the whole country per pupil. So you can imagine that we had larger class sizes before, and now with COVID, trying to provide the safety that we need is almost impossible. Funding for education has been cut by our school board, and I hear, you know, like Lorraine, that we'll start the school year with the teachers, but if there are not enough students that are coming to school or participating through distance learning, then they will move teachers to different locations. Like Alyssa said, workloads have increased by double, expecting us to be able to get the work done. Just like Big E was saying, we are expected to teach students online and in the classroom simultaneously, which is impossible. And also not really given trainings on how to use the programs, how to teach students. Most of the stuff we come up on our own. And having little notice in the spring, we had our experiences with that. We're expected to protect our students. So far, they say we're going to be cleaning between students. We have masks, plexiglass shields, social distancing, and intricate planning of schedules in the building. But our buildings are old. It sounds like across the country, and horrible ventilation systems. And it's not enough. It's not enough to stop the deaths in this pandemic. Teachers are protesting here in Utah. We went to a protest on the 4th where our union was coming out and saying what the schools are doing is not enough to keep us safe. The class sizes, the cleaning supplies, all of that, it's not going to work. Recently, there was a win where they decided that kids can't come to school if they've been exposed, or teachers can't come to school if they were exposed. Before, they were saying that if they were exposed, they only had to have the symptoms. So that was a win with our union, talking with politicians and with the districts. And talking about disparity between the schools. I work on the west side of town, which is a poorer side of town, where when I was doing distance learning, which I had 40 on my caseload, only 20 came even online. And the students that I work with are the most in need of support, behaviorally, educationally, all of those things. And they weren't getting an education. And we understand, especially because students, families can't afford to stay home and teach their students. You know, it's that wage gap. It's the essential workers that are being sacrificed and pushed forward as human sacrifices to keep the economy going and to survive. So, thank you.
Thank you, Alyssa. Thank you, Summer, for bringing us up to date on those struggles in Salt Lake City. Before introducing our last speaker and before the Q&A, again, remember, you got that Q&A function. If you're watching on Zoom, go ahead and drop any questions you have in there. If you're watching on Facebook, go ahead and put any questions you have in the chat. I wanted to talk a little bit about a different country's response to COVID-19 and protecting its workers' health. And just to show that it doesn't have to be this way, that what we're going through now in the United States and what so many people on this webinar have already spoken very eloquently about is not necessary, it's not inevitable. It can be another way. And that, to show that, I really want to talk about the example of Cuba and how they're handling the crisis with COVID-19. So as of right now, Cuba has had 88 deaths from COVID. Not 8,800 or 88,000, 88. The US has had a bit over 160,000. So compared to the size of the population, that means that for every million people in Cuba, 8 have passed away from COVID-19. In the US, 61 times more have died. 488 people for every million people living in the United States have died from COVID-19. Now, 61 times, that's a pretty incredible disparity, especially when you consider that the US is one of the wealthiest countries in the world, and Cuba is not a terribly wealthy country, still not very industrialized. It's endured decades of economic privation due to the US blockade of Cuba, which prevents Cuba not only from interacting with trade with the United States, but many other countries around the world because of the extraterritorial nature of that blockade and the influence the US has on the international banking system. So why is it that this, put upon impoverished country is able to have just 161 times the number of deaths from COVID relative to its population than the US has? Why is that? Well, it's really simple. It's one word: socialism. It's because Cuba is a socialist country. It's because the economy there is planned. Instead of the anarchy of capitalist production, the country has a planned economy that is organized for the benefit of its people. And so that means that during the COVID-19 pandemic, Cuba can shut down most international flights. There's almost no international flights coming into Cuba right now to prevent the very substantial tourist industry from bringing COVID-19 in large numbers onto the island. Now, that's a real sacrifice Cuba is making. It's a real sacrifice because tourism is a major component of the Cuban economy, and we've just passed through one of the most important tourist seasons. But Cuba was able to do that and able to provide for its people nonetheless because it's a planned economy. An economy that's planned for the benefit of its people. That means that when there's more than 5 people on a block that have COVID-19, that block and all the blocks around it, or if it's a small village, that entire village will be put in a quarantine. And people from outside will come and provide not only all the PPE they need, but all the food and other medical supplies. Everything they need is provided for. If people in a large city fall ill, there are quarantine centers set up where they and their families can go to live safely and receive retrovirals that have the potential to reduce the symptoms and lethality of COVID-19. These are drugs that are not available to us here in the United States because of the blockade. And you have an enormous public health system to do contact tracing because Cuba invests its resources in public health, whereas here in the United States, we invest our resources in 800 military bases around the world. Furthermore, in the United States, we have a culture of individualism. The idea of doing something together and fighting this pandemic is a communal activity. We all have to wear the masks. We all have to be responsible. We all have to be conscious of how we're interacting with other people. Is something that's really aggressively rejected in the United States, whereas Cuba is literally a country built on a culture of communal activity, that we together are going to build a society even when imperialism is demanding that it be destroyed and conquered. You know, right now in the US, 30 to 40% of people in a lot of parts of the US are behind on their rents. You know, an enormous, really inconceivable number of renters are facing potential eviction in the coming months. In Cuba, 0 people are facing eviction. 0 people. Why? Because in 1959, after the victory of the revolution, the land reform not only ensured that the landless peasants in the countryside would receive the land they had worked for the wealthy landowners now living in Miami, but that all the people in the cities would receive ownership of their housing. The vast, vast, vast majority of people in Cuba own their housing. Nobody is worried about an eviction. And like I said, if anybody falls ill, the system is in place to provide what they and their family and their community needs. And, you know, again, I just want to emphasize again, this is not a fantasy. This is a real thing. This is happening 90 miles off the coast of Florida. And if it's possible there, it's possible here. So I just want to close out really quick by raising up some socialist demands that Workers' World Party has been putting out in response to this crisis. Demands that are winnable, demands that are possible, that like socialism, that like workers' control of the means of production, are things that we can achieve through organization and through struggle. So we are demanding free healthcare for all, nationalize the healthcare system under community control, full benefits for all, full pay, benefits, guaranteed income. Thanks that's up on the screen right now. Thank you very much. Food, housing, and medical supplies, and utilities, including internet for all. As a number of speakers raised, the unequal access to internet is a huge issue as we go forward with the necessity of long-distance learning. We need to suspend rent, evictions, mortgages, utility shutoffs, and all debt. We need to prioritize resources for communities of color, the migrant community, which has received none of the stimulus benefits that have been let out by the government, meager as those are. The LGBTQ2+ people, seniors, youth, people with disabilities, these most oppressed sectors of our society have to be prioritized in the response to the pandemic, not ignored. We need to empty the prisons and detention centers. Right now, a prison sentence is a Russian roulette death sentence. We need to shut down ICE. We need a community control, not the cops and the military running everything. We need $2 trillion to be given to the workers, not the banks and the military. And finally, we need to end the US wars, sanctions, and environmental destruction. So on that note, I want to introduce our next speaker, who's Devin from Pensacola, Florida. Devin uses they, them pronouns and is the president of STRIVE, Socialist Trans Initiative, a transgender advocacy organization in Pensacola. And they're also a member of the recently formed Central Gulf Coast branch of Workers' World Party. Devin, can you tell us how the trans community has been impacted by COVID-19, in particular in relation to education, housing, and unemployment? Thank you.
Thank you, Nate, and thank you to all the panelists for tonight. So, since the end of 2019, COVID-19 has ravaged the world, killing scores of innocent people and affecting even more. As is often the case with epidemics of any sort, the most marginalized suffer the most. I am on this panel tonight not as an education worker, not as a school worker of any kind, but as an advocate for the transgender community, of which I am a part of, to discuss the effects of COVID-19 on the transgender community. Transgender people already face the brunt of capitalism's evils in the forms of lack of housing, education, jobs, and healthcare. Down here in Northwest Florida, I oversee an organization called STRIVE, as Nate mentioned, or Socialist Trans Initiative, and I will put that information in the chat box for everyone to see. We provide material services to transgender people. Our main goal is housing. There are no shelters in our county that will accept transgender people, so we have built our own network of safe housing for trans people. And what this looks like is people in the community opening up their homes, even if they have a couch to spare. We put them in our network. Unfortunately, living in Florida, where there are continued surges of COVID cases, this has resulted in us having to temporarily suspend our housing program, leaving multiple transgender people without a place to stay. That we must shut down a housing network amidst the pandemic is a direct attack on transgender people by the capitalists, who continue to lie about COVID numbers, perpetuate the myth that it is a hoax, and any other tactic that they can use to keep money in their pockets, and a reserve army of unemployed, as well as a reserve army of white supremacist lackeys to enforce it. This epidemic of homelessness that is surging will affect transgender people the most. How can we as trans people get masks or gloves when we can't even find a place to sleep or rest? It is inconceivable that transgender people can safely get through this epidemic or any other due to the continuous attacks on us by capitalism and imperialism. Transgender people already face among the highest rates of discrimination in healthcare. And I am a transgender person who used to work in the healthcare industry, and I've seen this happen with my own eyes. Many transgender people do not even go to the doctor for fear of being antagonized or simply turned away and refused service. Additionally, with the lack of employment for transgender people for the aforementioned reasons, many of us cannot even afford to see a doctor. Parallel to this is the fact that transgender people face higher amounts of HIV that goes untreated and eventually progresses to AIDS, cancer that goes untreated, and any other diseases that will go untreated. Therefore, this makes even more of us immunocompromised and thus more exposed to COVID-19. But even most of those of us who show symptoms cannot get help because we can't afford a doctor's visit, or doctors will refuse to treat us. In terms of education right now, we're at a bit of a contradiction. So 10 years ago, when I was in high school, there was no such thing in our area as a gay-straight alliance, as an LGBTQ student group. Those have only recently started popping up here in the last decade or so, and they provide a safe space for LGBTQ youth at school if they do not have it at home due to whatever environment they're being raised in. So the problem is that schools are opening back up. However, these kids are now being exposed at school to COVID-19 and things of the sort. So schools are closing down, resorting to virtual learning, and now they have no safe space at home. So it's either go to school, get sick potentially, die potentially, or stay at home and face the abuse that many LGBTQ youth face, which is a statistical fact. So it's imperative that we recognize that contradiction and that we continue to work to make schools safer, to make places safer, to make the workplace safer, as safe as it can be under capitalism. The last thing I wanted to mention was the issue of COVID-19 in the workplace for transgender people. It's very hard for transgender people to get jobs due to, again, discrimination, antagonism, things like that. However, COVID-19 has only made this worse. In Santa Monica, California, just last month, Angela Martinez Gomez, who is a trans woman working at a Burger King in Santa Monica, died from COVID-19. And Burger King, when questioned about why they continued to make this woman come to work, said that it must have been
Devin, we lost your sound there for a second. I don't know if maybe you want to mute and unmute to see if that fixes the sound.
Okay, am I back?
Yes, we can hear you now. Thanks, Devin.
Thank you.
We just lost you for maybe 10, 15 seconds.
All right, I'll revisit that. Burger King in Santa Monica, California, forced a trans woman named Angela Martinez Gomez to continue to come to work, and she died because she was positive for COVID-19. She died from the effects of that, and they blamed it essentially on her taking hormones, which is again a direct attack on trans people. It's a direct attack on all the progress that is made in the medical establishment for transgender people. The Burger King workers went on strike. Any updates on that strike, I have not been made aware of, but there are strikes from fast food workers in the country who are losing their lives because the capitalist pigs insist on continuing to stuff their pockets. There is a prolonged genocide against the transgender community, particularly around Black trans women, that is solely the work of anti-transgender capitalist colonialists, and the COVID-19 epidemic is accelerating this. Make no mistake that the only cure for this is socialism, a socialist revolution. Thank you.
And thank you so much, Devin. There's so many struggles going on, and all of the communities that are being impacted either through the schools or through the oppression of the transgender community and the entire LGBTQ 2S+ community is just incredible. Before we move to the question and answer discussion, I would like to let everyone know that you can subscribe to Workers' World newspaper and have it delivered directly to your inbox. Someday it'll be delivered directly to your house, but right now we're not printing, but it can be delivered directly to your inbox by going to https:/workers.org. And yeah, and you can get, we print each week, we print a PDF. We publish a PDF on our website. We will be hopefully printing the paper soon. Now, I just want to take 1 second also to promote a new book that has come from Workers' World Party. It is entitled What Road to Socialism? And you can find out more about it by visiting our website. You can download it for free or you can buy it. The URL is listed. It is an analysis of, it is a compilation of many articles concerning working class struggles, very, very current, an analysis of the current economic crisis, the fight against racism and police terror, and what opportunities there are for our class, the working class, to abolish capitalism and establish socialism in the United States. And again, more information is available at the website. So now I'd like to invite all of the panelists to turn on their video, and so that you can participate in the Q&A discussion. And please keep your videos on, but keep yourself muted until you're ready to speak. And that way we can ensure that everybody will be, that we'll be able to hear each other. Nate and I are gonna take turns, and I wanted to, I'm gonna prioritize a question that came in while people are speaking. And again, it's for anyone who feels like they can answer this. How are parents reacting in your community? You can only tell by your community, reacting to the reopening of the schools, and are they involved in the campaigns for the safety of schools? You can raise your hand or just jump in.
I am a parent. I'm
No, that's important, right?
Yeah, I'm having to send my daughter to school because I will be at work, working. I think parents are torn because a lot of people have jobs that they have to work and they can't keep track of their kids, and they didn't go to school to be teachers, and they're trying to survive. But there are definitely parents involved in worrying about their kids, contracting COVID. Yeah.
Anyone else would like to? I mean, I think that what the school districts and the media and the current administration really is attempting to do is to play the parents against the teachers, or play the parents against the education workers. And I just will say, just very briefly, in my district in Oakland, the Oakland Education Association just put out a video in English and several different languages, the languages of our community. And it involved parents, it involved teachers who were parents, it involved teachers, all speaking about the need to have a safe reopening of schools. Right now, at this point, Oakland is not going to reopen in person. We don't know when it will reopen in person. We don't know how it will reopen, and it's still being negotiated with the district. But this I don't know what you'd call it, but series of videos that the union put out was very effective in showing support. And there is an incredible amount of support in the Oakland community for making sure that, even though the parents are torn because they need to go to work, they also want their children to survive, and they want the teachers and the education workers to survive. So
John had his hand up to add something.
Yeah, everybody. What I would like to add to that is, I mean, I can only speak for the greater New Orleans area, but initially, a lot of the media, which Judy, I know you mentioned at the beginning of this call, that we can't trust the media, and the media, they were playing nothing but sound bites from school officials, district officials, board members, who are all in the pockets of the various business communities. And so they are making it seem like everything is fine, everything is safe, it's all good, we're set to go. And what we started to do then here in Greater New Orleans area was to organize direct actions, very visible direct actions. We started shifting the narrative, and that's very important. I think as education workers, we need to shift the narrative, because if all people at home are seeing are these district officials who, again, are in the pockets of the business community, they're going to believe it. They're going to believe, okay, yeah, everything is good. But when education workers themselves are stepping out and speaking out and saying, wait a second, not quite, not at all, that gives people some pause, and they start to ask questions. And when people start to ask questions, they quickly find out the answers aren't what the people who are holding these positions say that they are.
I mean, it keep people in such an economic bind, to where people are scared to, and rightfully, it's hard to, because I want you, we got to wake up the sleeping giant. That's something we always continuously saying. I tell people all the time, man, look, they got more us than they are them, you know what I mean? And a matter of, I promise you got more in common than we got different. And it's a matter of, we recognize the power we got as the masses of poor people, not just in this city or this state, but across the globe, you know what I'm saying? And just making them realize that, and like I tell them, like, look, I'm 6'4" right now, Big E, you know what I'm saying, this and that, but I promise you, you get enough ants together, you know what I'm saying, to deal with me, and that's the way in which we got to be able to empower people, to make them realize that everything it is, there's people on this call say, like, a lot of this is preaching to the choir, and it's cool and all, and it's sharpening our steel, you know what I'm saying, iron and iron, but it's a matter of, you know what I'm saying, I'm constantly trying to reach out those that's not going to come to this here, and how is it I relate this work to them and make them realize that they too, you know what I'm saying, is capable of doing what it is I'm doing, and many people like me. So that's the crust of it. I mean, whenever you confront these people, these powers that be, ask them, are their kids going to those schools? You know what I'm saying? Are they going to be in those classrooms? Just flip it on them real quick. They're going they're going to BS talk you. See, that's the thing. Like, you can tell people that talk straight. See, like, they ain't going to let me talk into too many places. Like, like, people get nervous when I come around. You know what I'm saying? I'm tall and all this, you know what I'm saying? I'm overbearing. I know what I got to say. You know what I'm saying? I ain't scared to say it. And so that's the thing in which, and it empowers others, man. So that's what we got to continuously keep doing. I promise you, dog, everything I got in me, you know, many people out there across the globe got it in them too. So, you know, just keep putting that foot forward, man. And look, another thing with this, you know, we talk about the socialist movement, the communist thing, it's a matter of, we got the most inclusive tent in the world. See, like Republicans, Democrats, they got this little linear pack thing. We got the most inclusive, like it's everybody and it's all living things, you know what I'm saying? Because whenever I say, you know, I want to fight for a better world, not just for people, but, you know what I'm saying, I care about living entities as well, you know what I'm saying? Humans are the ones that done this damn place wrong, you know, so I don't want to say just them. But anyway, man, I don't want, you know, keep blabbering, you know, keep empowering.
Thanks, Biggie. That's, you know, really inspiring to hear. And you're absolutely right. You know, revolutionaries around the world, the socialist movement is the biggest tent there is. Lorraine, I was wondering if maybe there was a question for you that I'm wondering if you could answer. I know you answered it in the chat, but not everybody watching can see the chat. So somebody asked, is Puerto Rico able to limit tourism? You know, the U.S. has banned the U.S. has been banned from traveling. People from the U.S. have been banned from traveling to many countries around the world. So, you know, there's been some, you know, a lot of tourism to Puerto Rico, and I'm wondering if you had any comments on that.
First of all, Puerto Rico cannot control their airways, or they can't control their shipping. We know that because of the U.S. colonialism. There has been, from communities, activist communities have asked for the governor to make certain regulations. She did implement that travelers now have to go with tests that they've done for COVID, but many travelers are not doing that. They've also asked for people to do quarantines, but there's been some issues where actually tourists have attacked people in San Juan. When they're asked, there was a grocery store worker who asked somebody to please put their mask, and they spit on them. And that became a very big incident over there. And so it is a big problem. There was a recent action that was done by the socialist movement where they went to the airport and they actually staged a caravan and demonstration to highlight the problem of tourists coming into the airports, and they're not following the quarantine. Some of them are not using masks. I know that recently the governor said that she was going to fine people that are not using masks. And so there's a hope that they will follow this, but it's, you know, basically the flights are being given for like $40. So people are just running there, and it's becoming a real dangerous situation because Puerto Rico's health system is practically collapsed. And in places like Vieques, there's not even one hospital. So really it's like a death sentence if you think about it, because if there's no health facilities. And what's ironic is that one of the companies that actually creates a lot of the tests for COVID in the States and internationally doesn't give those particular tests in Puerto Rico. They actually benefit as a company from being on the island and all the exemptions that they have. They don't have to pay all these taxes, yet Puerto Rican people do not have access to those COVID tests. So that's the real contradiction in being a colony of the United States, that despite the fact that that company is there that creates COVID tests, people in Puerto Rico have so limited access to COVID tests, and the turnaround for the test, it takes so long. It takes sometimes 8 days. So there's a real problem with that. And there's a problem also in the tracing. And actually what the cases are that are being projected are not what the actual cases are. It's not being reported. So there's definitely a lot of concern. There's a second action that's going to be done in August now, And it's done also by the Movimiento Socialista de Trabajadores. They want to continue to pressure the government so that the tourism is contained, because that's the major hub. This is why in New York, the center of the pandemic was so high in Queens, because that's where everybody was coming in through the airports. And so communities like Corona was the epicenter. So definitely having airports and airports that are just getting people from all the hotspots are really detrimental to those communities.
Thanks, Lorraine. So unfortunately, we're running kind of short on time. So I think it's been about an hour and a half, so it's about time to wrap up. I know there's a few more questions to answer. This is how it always is. Every time you have a discussion going, there's always going to be more to be discussed than there's time for. So just before we close it out, I wanted to ask those panelists who didn't have a chance to answer a question, if they have any final remarks. If Andre or Steve or Devin or Alyssa had anything they might just want to say to close us out.
Is Andre still on the call?
Andre, would you like to add anything? You go ahead and turn your camera on if so.
Well, I sympathize with the sister that was talking about Puerto Rico. I remember they always, this government always treat Puerto Rico as second-class citizens when Puerto Rico is supposed to be a part of the United States. I remember I had to go to some rally they did when they were doing the reparations, demanding reparations for the Puerto Ricans and stuff like that. That was pretty cool of the U.S. government to treat the people of Puerto Rico that way, and this is a shame. So they're doing that over COVID. It's all about racism at its core. I regret to hear that, but yeah, that's what I had. Thank you. Go ahead.
Andre, it's really important that we have that solidarity with struggles all around the world. Free
Yes.
Puerto Rico.
Devin has their hand up. So go ahead, Devin.
Devin, would you like to?
Yes, I just wanted to highlight one more thing. Over here in Florida, we've been in the news a lot lately, as we often are, for things that are not good. And there is a struggle being led locally by a candidate comrade for Workers' World Central Gulf Coast named Shannon. And the Party for Socialism and Liberation chapter here, led by Sarah. And Shannon and Sarah are both teachers in the county. And we have started 6 days of action against reopening the schools here. And I think we're on day 4 now. And earlier, a group of people showed up at the county commissioner office to, again, advocate for the closure of schools. Last night, they requested that all teachers in the state of Florida, all educational workers, bus drivers, custodians, things like that, write a will or an obituary. And on Saturday, a group of people will be marching on the governor's mansion in Tallahassee, and they will post up outside of his mansion and read these obituaries and wills out loud to once again advocate and demand for the closure of schools. So I did want to highlight that struggle that is going on in Florida right now, and that this is being led by a multi-group coalition of communists, of socialists and other leftists, the teachers unions. So it is happening over here as well. And I did want to highlight and acknowledge that struggle.
Thank you so much, Devin. Okay, Alyssa or Summer, yes, you're good.
Yeah, Alyssa and I were just talking, just thinking about the information that we've shared and how terrible it is, but also kind of an exciting time in Utah where teachers are actually thinking about striking, which is the last time they went on strike was when I was in elementary school, and I'm 38. My union is not radical, it is not militant, but teachers are willing to strike, and we have the power to push this forward to make the changes that we need to happen. That's all.
If I could just say one quick thing off of that, it's really important that within our unions that and who are willing to fight, because if a union isn't willing to fight, then again we have to take matters into our own hands, because again at this point this is life or death, and one life lost is one too many.
Thanks, John. You're absolutely right. If you don't have a union, fight to get one. If you have one, fight to make it fight. Steve, you want to just go ahead and close us out?
Well, I first wanted to say, power and solidarity and love to everybody on this call who has been forced back to work. Everybody knows, I think, in the world that it's not right, that the surge of the pandemic has also already been shown that when this reopening happens in other areas of society, the result is a mounting infection and death toll, leading the world in no planning and anarchic planning. I want to salute, I think it was Summer who just said that, the teachers are talking about striking. Unfortunately, the way this is going to happen is that the infection rate will spread. The science of it shows it, it proves it, even in these days and weeks that we are living. And, in Boston, by using the strike word, by showing up, by saying that we will not compromise, our workers, but also our families. We're all parents, we're grandparents, we're uncles and nieces and nephews of tens of thousands of children who we care for every day. And we know that the priority is in all of this to stop this reopening, which is really an excuse for the Wall Street billionaires to try and save their system. And we can't save it by more deaths. So I salute everybody who is, fighting from the ground. And, I think that the last resort that we have is really the first weapon that we have. To say that we're going to withhold our labor is really to save lives at this point. And anyway, solidarity and power to everybody. This is a historic struggle.
Thanks, Steve, for those closing words. Thank you again to all of our panelists who have joined us. This has been a really informative, powerful webinar. I hope everybody that's participated has had an opportunity to learn some from this and also to gain inspiration in the struggle going forward. So again, I want to thank our panelists. I want to thank everyone who's tuned in to see us on Zoom and on Facebook. If you want to review this video, it will be posted very shortly to Facebook. And a few days out, it should be up on YouTube as well. So thank you again, everybody, and have a good night. Build a worker's world.
Well, wait, before we leave, because you missed something, Nate. We want to invite people to return and be with us next Thursday. We did skip a whole section here, but Next Thursday, we are going to have a very special webinar on Thursday, August 13th, same time and place, commemorating Black August, the struggles of Black revolutionary prisoners from California to New York who dared to stand up to the criminal and justice system in this country. And I know we've held you a little longer than usual. We want to thank you for being part of this really powerful webinar. Good night, everybody. Stay safe and keep fighting for a workers' world. Bye, everybody.